Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 195 of Album of the Day, which for today's album review, I'm going to be talking about a Los Angeles singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist who sort of first came onto sort of the independent bedroom scene in 2014, and just recently he's become that much more widely known off of critical acclaim, along with playing a bunch of different big festivals, including Pitchfork Music Festival, one which he's played for the last couple of years. Of course, I'm talking about the multi-talented singer-songwriter known as Moses Sumney, and I'm here to review his debut album, which dropped on September 22nd, 2017 on Jaguar Records. And the album is called Aromanticism, and as you can see, I own it on vinyl here. And this is such an amazing record. In fact, I'd have to say Moses Sumney is probably my number one new artist of 2017, probably. So, when I saw this at Soundgarden, there was no way I could stay away from it. I had to get it on vinyl, because this is such an amazing record. Anyway, here's the front cover. Really beautiful album cover right here. It sort of looks like contemporary art a little bit, which is really nice. Some stuff that I'm really into. And there's the back cover. There's 11 tracks on the record, but it's a pretty short record. It clocks in at over 34 minutes because a few of the tracks are basically just some interludes, kind of tying the whole album together, while the other 8 seem more like actual songs, pretty much. So this is the kind of record where, if you want just a straightforward poppy album full of 3 minute that clock in at over 3 minutes, this isn't your album. But if you're willing to look for something a little more complex, ambitious, and a lot more lavish, and something very beautiful, like this album is one of the most beautiful things I've heard from last year, definitely recommend you check out this album. Anyway, here's a gatefold here, which there's photos of him with a horse on here too, as you'll see in this booklet. It's like this giant lyric booklet, and it's got the lyrics and some more cool artwork. That's a cool photo right there. And some of these visuals are inspired by little, kind of video visuals that he has for some of these songs. And then there are the liner notes. And this is the vinyl sleeve, and it did have a download card, but I used it around the time I bought this album. And there's side A, and then side B. And there's a hidden track on here, which is actually pretty cool. That's after a little bit of a pause from the last track. And that's the vinyl version of Aromanticism, the new album from Moses Sumney. This album definitely sees one pretty promising new talent here, and one of the big, like, glaring reasons for that is his voice. His voice is has an incredibly impressive, very wide range. He can sing tenor and alto mostly, but at points he'll even break out in bassy, lower tones. And also, it is absolute heaven when he breaks out into his soprano sort of howl. Um, you can pretty much see his impressive range right off the bat with the opening track, which is basically a little intro tune called Man on the Moon Reprise, which is like a reprise of a song that he had on an EP that he had back in 2014. And really just a gorgeous way to open up the album, which right off the bat gives you goosebumps with his kind of layers of vocals, which sound like a 30-person choir in a one-person body. The following that is the first actual song on the record, Don't Bother Calling, which opens up with this brooding bass line, which just sounds very beautiful and delicate on the ears, which is played by Moses Sumney himself, actually. And then we see that he also has talent, not only has the vocalist, but a lyricist too. I mean, the title Aromanticism shows that this is not an album of love songs, or these songs aren't romantic necessarily, kind of looking at sort of relationships and stuff like that in a kind of sort of introspective sort of manner. And his lyrics are like super poetic, like on the lines of, you need a solid, but I'm made of liquid, trust. Poeticism right there. And also to pair with this beautiful bass riff is are these very sweet kisses of strings that are like kind of, once again, kind of are like honey to the ears with the way they kind of melt in with his voice and sound very gorgeous on there. So right off the bat we see some pretty stripped back and kind of simple, but at the same time very effective arrangements and lyrical content. And then the song Plastic, opens up with kind of this odd noise intro before it eventually comes into this kind of soulful guitar riff, which sounds kind of like somber, but at the same time very kind of once again very soothing to listen to. And yet another song where we really do see plenty of attention to detail to his lyrical content. 10 on lines such as, funny how a stomach unfed seems satisfied because it's swell and swollen. See my silhouette, so you're standing scared of me. And sort of revealing a secret that his wings are made of plastic. It's the kind of thing that, he could easily just recite as a poem and it would still sound like gold. Still sound like gold for sure. And this is another song where he does so well with sort of kind of changing the tone of his voice. In some of the lines sort of turning from a higher tone into kind of a higher bassy tone, into a lower bassy tone, which I like. And this song also is paired with really beautiful string arrangements that are just so angelic and velvety, and it sounds very nice on there. And then we have the song Quarrel, which is the longest track on the record and probably my favorite here on the album. Love all the different instruments that are incorporated into this track. the very beautiful harp, as well as some upright bass, some uh, guitar. But then the song eventually changes sort of instrumentation in different sections, like towards the middle, all the instruments drop out except for acoustic guitar and mellotron woodwinds. Uh, but then it transitions into this funky bass guitar and synth breakdown, which just sounds so like it's ecstasy for the ears right there. And then eventually closes out with a kind of jazzy, introspective piano coda, which sounds really nice. And not to mention, the bass guitarist on this track happens to be none other than Thundercat, doing that really soulful bass improv towards the end of the track. So that's awesome. Uh, on this song Moses definitely does share plenty of personality with his voice and his lyrics, like lines of to whom much is given, much is required. Luxurious liver, you never inquire. Like lyrics that just like give me like goosebumps when I hear them. They're just that beautiful. Then after this, we get kind of an odd interlude with the track Stoicism, which pairs some kind of dark piano, which pairs kind of a dark piano loop with some kind of somber horns, and Moses sort of going with this monologue about how when he was young he was, one that wasn't really as cared for as much as he wanted to be. Like how his mom would drop him off in his family's second-hand Mitsubishi Caravan and how he would glance back and like tell her that he loves her, and then of course she would sigh back, "Thank you." And it very beautifully transitions into the next track, Lonely World, which is by far probably the most kind of, theatrical, I think, track on the record, which opens up with these really kind of like dark and kind of in your face guitar swells. It's probably maybe actually the angriest sounding track on the record, but at the same time still with plenty of beautiful delicacy to it for sure. It features a really nice kind of funky bass line from Thundercat. In fact, Thundercat actually co-wrote the instrumental, which definitely just makes this instrumental sound nice and jazzy. And Moses really pulls me in towards the middle with a very with a very effective vocal melody, over some lyrics that, just to recite them, where I could just recite them to you right now, but it probably wouldn't sound as good as when Moses very beautifully sort of portrays them via his very soulful voice. Very soulful voice. And also I do love the other instrumentation that's incorporated there, the kind of grand horns, and then the ending of the song is just super explosive, and it sort of like overblows the guitar tones a little bit, but kind of intentionally to sort of really make you feel kind of the sense of anger that Moses himself may be feeling. And of course he does break out into his soprano with this verse, and does sound just incredible when he does it. Following that is like all the layers of vocals and some kind of nervous banjo at the end. So at the end, over some really cool kind of jazzy drumming on there. The song "Make Out in My Car" is another song that is kind of simple, but at the same time still has plenty of intricacy to it with the kind of stripped back instrumental, which basically just consists of kind of like stomp and finger snap percussion, what sounds like guitar that's like fragmented and sort of spliced together to make it sound like a backwards guitar a little bit, along with these really beautiful along with these very beautiful woodwinds on there too, like the fluttering flutes on there definitely definitely add plenty of just the right kiss of sweetness to it without sort of going overboard on the sugar. Like it's almost sort of like a cup of hot tea almost in the sense of, but with the right balance in the sense of the warm water soothes your throat and there's plenty of sugar and lemon in it to sort of make it, to give it a little extra flavor without like sort of giving you like automatic like sugar rush in your face. That's kind of how I feel about like the songs on this Moses Sumney album. Like this song in particular, I think. And it just has two lines on it, which are basically, I'm not trying to go to bed with you. I just want to make out in my car, which I know the title may sound a bit cliched and send a few eyes rolling like it did with me at first, but once you listen to the song and kind of listen to how like kind of actually pretty effective those two lines are, you'll realize that there's actually a little bit of mystery to the song. Like he doesn't really reveal what he's excuse me, like he never really reveals what he's actually talking about, but that's pretty much says. But still, at the same time, I feel with this track, he really said enough with those two lines, as well as the very nice instrumentation that accompanies it. Song that accompanies it. And then we have kind of the third interlude of this album, which is The Cocoon-Eyed Baby, which is a very beautiful, sort of poetic monologue, sort of creating this picture of a cocoon-eyed baby with a swollen, clenched hand that cries out in protest in a scream, raw and grotesque, which is definitely enough to like give you chills, as it's probably one of the more chilling sort of vignettes that he creates on this album. And I love how right after he says the cocoon-eyed babies, swollen, clenched hand, we sort of get a really cool like sort of warbly vocal response afterwards, which sounds like it could be the cocoon-eyed baby character sort of crying out in protest, as he says in the next line. Very gorgeous right there, which fits perfectly as a transition for the first single on the record, Doomed, which is probably the saddest track on the album lyrically. So it makes sense that we have these kind of somber, devastating synths as the backing instrumentation for this song, because this is definitely a song about death, as I'm listening to the lyrics, sort of asking himself, hollow one with inverted tongue, from whence does fulfillment come? When I expel from this mortal shell, will I die for living numb? Sort of talking about sort of the kind of fear that, sort of reflecting on sort of the fear and uncertainty you feel when you're dying, which definitely makes this song definitely very a very emotional moment on the album. But this is one song where he definitely does show plenty of power with his very delicate voice. So it makes sense that all the song needed instrumentation-wise was just some very beautiful, if very heartbreaking synth arrangements. which is provided by the producer of this song, Matt Otto. Yeah. Otto. And then after that we have Indulge Me, which is like, which surprisingly incorporates folk elements with an acoustic guitar, which of course alongside some kind of watery kind of synthesizers, which eventually do kind of drop out after the first like minute of the song and before he starts singing. Excuse me. And I do really like the poetic lines like Dead Sea as barren as a stutter and colored laughter. And sort of concluding how he doesn't really trouble anybody, and sort of seeing how all his old lovers have found others, and sort of feeling free and kind of feeling like he now has kind of a purpose in life. And this is another like song title that at first may send eyes rolling, but once you actually listen to the lyrics and really get to hear the character and his voice, you're gonna realize that it's actually a lot more complex than it may look at surface level. And then this album closes out with a gorgeous outro track with Self-Help Tape, which is one song that has like really no like sung lyrics, but really the emotion and the story told in a song is told through his voice, and it sounds downright heavenly, which kind of starts out with a kind of like an upright bass a little bit, but with his voice. And then eventually he really gets up really high in his range here and like hits that really beautiful soprano howl, which I can't help but kind of have kind of an emotional kind of reaction to it, because it's like that beautiful, and a really nice atmospheric instrumental to go with it too, which features kind of atmospheric guitars, some bass, as well as some synth that kind of swells in the background, kind of in the sort of kind of right in the midsection of this song. It actually reminds me a little bit of something off of Radiohead's latest album, A Moon-Shaped Pool, but not quite as somber and melancholy. or melancholy. And it also actually kind of reminds me of Radiohead a little bit in the sense of the ending of the track, which features these kind of spooky, kind of revolving, pitch-shifted vocal samples saying, imagine, which seems to be saying, imagine feeling free, imagine tasting free, and stuff like that. And they're kind of pitch shifting in and out, which does sound really nice on, which actually really works on there. Actually, one of the cases where the vocal pitch shifting actually really works. And then so that's pretty much the end of the album. But on the vinyl, I found out as I was listening to it for the first time on LP, after a little bit of a pause from the closing track, we go into a hidden track, which also kind of has a little bit of a Radiohead vibe to it, with some kind of somber piano as well as really gorgeous vocals, which pairs like kind of live sung vocals with like actually like kind of like pitch shifted background vocals, which again works really nicely on there. So any prejudices that you have about vocal pitch shifting, just put it at the door when you play this album. This album, which I'm not really sure what the title of this hidden track is just yet, nor have I really figured out the lyrics yet, but it does sound really beautiful. Like there's not one clunker here on this album. So yeah, definitely I love this album. It's beautiful. definitely check it out. Definitely check it out. I mean, I definitely do see, like I said, I do see Radiohead as an influence, but also like some soul, like Billie Holiday and Andrew Wyatt kind of plays a pretty big part in this record, and also the opening track actually sounds a little bit like something maybe Bon Iver could have done on like his latest record, 22 a Million, even though I'm not quite the biggest Bon Iver person, but those kind of influences kind of play a pretty significant role here on this record, but definitely with his own original talents, and definitely enough to sort of help him rise above his influences instead of just kind of, playing to his influences, just to kind of buy into the other kind of indie artists that have done that. Uh, I mean, definitely check out this record. Easily a 9 out of 10 for me, for sure. So I'm making a pretty bold statement here. So that's my review for Aromanticism, the newest album from Moses Sumney. I'll see you for episode 196.